Have I got... Okay, hopefully you can hear me now. So, hopefully this is going to make sense. My PC crashed at the moment I was clicking go live. Everything was set up. Oh, now I reckon my volume's too loud now. We had everything set. Everything was perfect. It was going to be a lovely intro. I was going to bring Vangeen in, like smooth it at the side. Like this. I'm going to show you on it. It's going to be like this. And now, Alex Vangeen. Hey, there he is. None of it went how it's supposed to go. If you say you can't hear me in the chat, I think that's just a delay. The microphone muted itself because the PC crashed. Let me know if the volume's bad. I now haven't had time to recheck things since I managed to get my PC back on. But welcome. Tell you what, I'm going to do the script that I was going to do before. Oh, I can't. Because when the PC crashed, my entire script disappeared from the screen. And it wasn't saved. So there we go. So, welcome to this. When I press the button, the name of the show should come up. It's this anyway. It's Full Chat. Welcome to Full Chat. It's basically me and Alex chatting about Formula 1. Well, the informality has begun immediately, hasn't it? We were supposed to have a nice, cool, formal intro. And that went down the toilet. Alex, please talk. Let's make sure that people can hear you.
This is what normally happens when me and you have a conversation. We normally turn on, our phones don't work. One of us can hear the other. One of the other's phones in the car doesn't work. And then we eventually, 10 minutes later, actually start to have our conversation. So to be fair, it's true to life, to our actual life and conversation.
What is particularly annoying is this PC has been on all day. Like, it's like it knew. It's like it knew. It had been on Twitter and it saw what time we were going to start. So what this is, guys, is going to be basically a chat about the upcoming Grand Prix, which would be a bit like me and Alex would have when we're just driving in our cars talking to each other. But we thought we'd involve you guys as well. Lower my mic 10%. Thank you very much. Yeah, any feedback on tech issues is helpful because, you know, PCs are evil. I've just lowered it by 10%. Let me know if it needs to go more. When
mine needs to go up apparently, so I can do that.
Right, I can do that for you. You don't need to do that. So, we're going to now start a concurrent Twitter space. So, we're about to click live on Twitter.
Good luck, everybody.
Yeah, fingers crossed. So, Alex, I need you to join the space as well as a speaker. And you need to position... Well, you've got a set of headphones. I don't quite have the luxury of headphones which are plugged into my phone for the Twitter space. You can only do Twitter spaces on mobile. You can't do them on the PC, which makes this a bit complicated. But I'm going to go live on Twitter and then add Alex as a speaker. But we're not going to interact with the people on Twitter. Here we go. We're going live now. So let me know if Alex is still a little bit low or if I'm still a bit loud. I'm going to turn the music down slightly too. People on Twitter won't be able to hear the music. Let's add Alex as a co-host. There we go.
We even have our first listener, Fabrice.
Excellent. I'm just turning down my mic a little bit. Guys, like I said, honestly, I promise, we had this all so technically worked out. Alex has rushed back from football to get here in time.
Yeah, it's why I look a bit hot and sweaty, because I've been playing football for the last hour. Scored 5 goals, though, so yay. That's a win for today.
So, everybody on Twitter who's joining now, welcome. You are part of a concurrent YouTube broadcast, YouTube live stream, and a Twitter space. It's supposed to be me and Alex Vangeen having a bit of a chat. We've already had some minor tech issues on YouTube.
Minor.
Alex, I have made you a co-host on the Twitter space, but you have to accept. So at the moment, people can only hear me. So just make sure... I know sometimes Twitter spaces have their own tech issues.
I have accepted.
Right, so it says you're a listener. Now it says you're a speaker. So as long as we've both turned our volume off on our phones, so we're not going back through the microphones on YouTube, this should now start to work. And we can actually start talking about Formula 1.
It should work.
Is your Twitter... Guys, on Twitter, on the space, you've got no way of telling us whether or not this is working, because we're not listening to you. Because we're mainly
wave and stuff, can't you? You can do emojis and stuff.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, if it's working on Twitter and you can hear us, give us like the little thumbs up or the wave or something like that. This is primarily a YouTube live stream. There's some visual aspects, and if you go to my Twitter profile, you'll see the link right at the top. It's the last thing I posted. But we should probably tell people what we're going to talk about. So first of all, upcoming race at COTA. Just a couple of days away, we've got the USA Grand Prix. Now, you know a lot more about the track than I do. We're going to talk about COTA. We're also... In fact, hang on, I've got buttons for this. COTA, there we go. If you're not on Twitter, you'll see... Oh, now I'm getting an echo of myself. So one of us has the sound going back through.
Not me. So it's you.
I've got it on minimum.
I have had Tom Horax on Twitter tell us that it's working. So that's a positive.
Okay, well that's good. As long as people can't hear a double sound on YouTube, then that's great. So anyway, there's COTA.
I just hit my microphone.
That's fine. I don't care on this stream. This, as you can already tell, this is less fun. So anyway, we're going to talk about COTA. We're also going to talk about the Mercedes upgrades. Oh, there we go. I pressed the button twice. So the picture on the screen is not of the Mercedes upgrades. We've got no idea what they look like. But we're going to go into a little bit of detail about those because I've read a bit about them. And later on, if we've got time, we're also going to talk a little bit about cost cap, although we haven't really had a lot of updates on cost cap. We're having some questions about how do you super chat. Okay, so if you want to, we're going to answer your questions, but if you want your question to be right at the top of our list, and you want us to interrupt what we're doing, send a super chat on YouTube. And you do that by basically clicking, I think there's like a little dollar button at the bottom of the chat when you're on mobile. It's probably similar on a PC. Just click on that, and then you get like priority messaging. And I'll try and notice it. If we don't notice it, post loads of messages, and I will notice it eventually. We've got a special button for that as well. Anyway, right, Alex, let's talk COTA.
Let's talk COTA.
So we basically have a track here which was made of lots of other tracks. So if I'm remembering this correctly, when they designed COTA, I don't know, is this a Tilke track? Is it a Herman Tilke track?
I think it was, but it was designed as bits of Silverstone, bits of Suzuka, bits of Spa, if I remember rightly. So that's why the first sector is very much Maggots, Beckett's, Suzuka, S's-esque. And it is obviously from a sim point of view, a wonderful, wonderful piece of circuit to drive, because it's that fast direction change, which what F1 is designed for. That's where they look their absolute best. When you look at a F1 car head-on coming into Copse and it just sweeps off to the right-hand side, it's one of the most incredible spectacles you'll ever see in physics, basically. And then it heads off down the big long straight, which gives you your great overtaking opportunity, and then the whole circuit changes and it turns into this tight, twisty, difficult to get the power down, little almost Mickey Mouse corners, when it then opens up again to fast flowing corners into a really tight 90-degree left-hander. So as a track to drive on sims and a track to watch, it's one of my favorites.
So I don't really know it because although I've got it on iRacing, I've barely used it. It's one of those things where when you're not used to a track and you don't know if you're going to like it, you just don't get round to doing it. And it's quite long as well. The only bit I know that reminds me of other circuits, though, is the Maggots and Beckett's bit near the start. So looking at the map here we've got on the screen, I guess that's turns 3, 5, 6, 7. I don't know where turn 4 got lost there, but yeah, it's that's the only bit I know. I don't recognise the rest of it from other tracks, but they say it's modelled on other circuits. So one issue. Sorry, go on.
I think the main aspect was that first sector. I think the rest of it was a case of. I mean, I've always said it looks like a knife. You've got the two hand positions that you can hold down the bottom. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It does look like some kind of weird hunting knife.
But I just think it lends itself really, really well to good racing, good overtaking. It's wide, it's fast. It's got, from my understanding, good tarmac. So there's plenty of places offline where you can still overtake and race, which is the key fundamentals. And I don't think we've really had a bad race here from what I remember.
So it's certainly modern. It's good for modern F1 cars. One potential problem is track limits. So we've seen, and I've just posted a picture up on the screen on YouTube, we've seen some cars go slightly wide. And in fact, in series that aren't Formula 1, we're looking at IndyCar here on the pictures, but it's not just IndyCar. I've seen other series like MX-5s and GTs and all sorts. They kind of used the off-track area as just part of the track, and it's not policed. Formula 1 tends to be a bit more policed than that. How has it been policed in the past? I can't remember whether we're strict or not here.
It's much more strict in F1. I mean, the pictures you're showing on the live stream make it a farce as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I've always been an advocate for track limits because that's the track that's designed to be raced. The only reason we have big runoff areas and things like that is purely for safety for when you make a mistake. They're not there to make you go faster. They're there to save you for when you do something silly and not destroy your car. I mean, also on tracks like that where it's open and used all year round for people who take maybe their own cars there, it's a great place to go because you don't wreck your own car. But the white lines define the track surface, and that's the skillful bit. Keeping the car within the white lines is the hard bit.
So we see other tracks that are modern that have lots of runoff. Sometimes you have like a grass strip or like pretend grass or even a piece of gravel in between the track that you're allowed to be on or the edge of the curb and then the massive runoff. But it doesn't look like COTA tends to have that. I think that's maybe why this is particularly bad. It's like there's really no penalty for running fully off. So we basically need it to be policed well. But I think this year, the race directors, for the whatever other faults they might have had, the race directors have been quite hot on track limits. So hopefully this is a complete non-issue that we're talking about now.
Oh, definitely. I mean, they definitely, of all the rules the governing bodies have stuck to this year, track limit seems to be the one that they've actually been really, really good with, and one of the ones I don't have a complaint about.
Okay, so I have just a question for the people that are in the stream. This is probably mainly for people on YouTube. Just let me know if Alex's audio is okay now, because a couple of people are saying it was a bit low. I've pumped his volume up as high as I can, and I think he looks like he's talking quite close to the mic. So just keep us informed on that because of the aforementioned tech issues we had 30 seconds before we went live. Okay, so that's probably enough about the track itself. But there's one team in particular that have who have told us, this isn't just a rumour, they've told us that they are bringing their last major upgrade of the year, and that is Mercedes. So I'm going to just pop up a little picture of Mercedes in case you forgot what they look like. They've had some small updates during the year. Mainly, it's been kind of different wing specs, as far as I know, and obviously they had some work done to the floor. But this sounds like a bit more of a fundamental change getting ready for next year. So a kind of reprofiling of the rear suspension area. We've got, I don't know whether the floor is different, but we've definitely got a weight reduction. So Mercedes is one of the teams that's been over the weight limit all year, and this is almost a 5 kilo reduction, which we're told is about 1/10 of a second a lap. That doesn't really mean a whole lot when you're 3 or 4 or 5 tenths behind in qualifying, sometimes a second behind, but it's something, and obviously less weight is good. We've had a super chat, by the way, so that means we're supposed to interrupt ourselves, but I don't believe there's a question attached to that super chat, so thank you for that. But feel free to ask a question if you want to. Oh, actually, I believe that there was a question from that particular user earlier about the cost cap. So, and the question was, why haven't Red Bull been punished yet? And my answer is because we don't actually know what the crime is yet, how bad it is, and what penalty the FIA will apply. But I've heard within the next 2 weeks we'll hear something. But that's kind of all I know on that one. Alex, anything to add? I did promise we'd interrupt ourselves if we got super chats.
I think the problem is with regards to the cost cap thing is we've had no information. The only slight update that I think we've had was when Zach Brown has put his letter into the FIA. The understanding is he mentions that it's 2 million quid that they're over. Again, that is still not official, still not anything that's been made public, but he says 2 million quid or $2 million in his letter, which is a substantial amount of money. You know, if they pay their aero engineers around 100 grand a year, that's a lot of aero engineers.
I'd be interested to know how Zach Brown knows that figure.
Of course.
But okay, so we kind of are waiting. We're all in the same boat, waiting to find out how bad the overspend was. I think it's irrelevant what it was spent on because it's all part of the same pool, and that's kind of, we've done that to death. We've tried to explain that it doesn't matter whether it's money that's gone on catering or on, you know, extra stickers for the motorhome. It really doesn't matter. It's all one pool, and you're supposed to budget that correctly. Anyway, right, let's get back to what we were talking about. So that's how our super chat interruptions work. I actually forgot to play the bumper. I've got a little bumper for super chat. So here's a late version. Sorry, people on Twitter, you won't hear this. We're just going to go quiet for 3 seconds whilst I press the button. There we go. I made that today. That is, if anyone's wondering, that's Millie Bobby Brown screaming, "Oh my God!" having a ride with Lewis Hamilton around this track, I believe, a couple of years ago. So around COTA.
It was this track.
So thank you for the super chat. Right, so we were talking about the Mercedes upgrades. Basically, less weight, and a different aerodynamic profile is the way it was worded. So allowing them to run the rear suspension higher, I believe. I might be wrong. I don't think they can run it any lower because it's already touching the floor. So I think it's a different aerodynamic profile, allowing them a greater range of setups. So what do you think about whether or not this matters for next year?
I mean, the thing we've all been talking about is, are Mercedes going to win a race this year? And will these new changes make that better for them? And more of an opportunity. I mean, if they're going to have any chance in the next few races, it's got to be here, because it's a bit like Silverstone, where they were fast. It's a bit like Spain, where they were fast, a high aerodynamic balance circuit. So if it's going to happen, it's going to happen here. It might give a bit more rake, which might help with the bouncing, because obviously we've got a long straight here, and if any bouncing is going to happen at all, it's going to happen there. You've got high speed, that double right-hander, a couple of corners before the end of the race.
Hang on, I have a map. I've got a map to show you. It is corner 16, 17 and 18, according to the map.
Where we had that brilliant bit of battle at the final lap between Kimi Räikkönen and Max, where Max cut up the inside of the track. Everyone went crazy, and then he got yanked out of the podium ceremony. That was funny. So corners like that is what really affects their bouncing, and if they can stop that on the high speed, then they've got a real good chance. They've got the two of the best drivers on the grid, and I think it's their final opportunity. Brazil, Mexico, and Abu Dhabi, I just don't think you're going to do it for them. Abu Dhabi maybe, but still gives me shivers talking about Abu Dhabi.
So Merc have had a couple of key problems this year, haven't they? It started off with the bouncing. So they had the porpoising or bouncing or whatever it was. Sometimes I think it was porpoising, like the technical definition of porpoising. I think other times it was just bouncing, where the car just had terrible ride. And that kind of masked the fact that they probably had other problems as well. One of those was drag. So we saw at the last race at Suzuka, it was basically impossible for Hamilton to get past Ocon, because every time he started to drag alongside, Ocon's Alpine would just drive away down the straight. So they've kind of got these couple of problems. I think allied to that as well is the fact that the car has been very, very peaky and only works in a very narrow setup window. And that's why you've seen, if you look at a graph of their relative pace to the rest of the field, it's kind of a really spiky up and down graph. Sometimes they're a lot closer, sometimes they're miles away. And I think that's partly due to the fact that the car just really only works in particular situations. So hopefully this update is something that's going to widen that window, allow them to run the car in more of a varied configuration, and it still work. But what it's not going to do, unfortunately for Merc fans, it's not going to catch them up to the pack, unless this just happens to be one of those tracks where they would have been close anyway, like Zandvoort, and this is what makes the difference. You know, if they'd had a 1 or 1.5 tenth improvement at Zandvoort, they'd have probably been clear. They'd have probably been the favourite rather than nearly the favourite, nearly winning. So I tend to agree with you, Alex. I think this is probably the last opportunity for Hamilton to keep his run going of winning in every season. I looked earlier, I think it's 15 years in a row he's won a race, and so this would make it 16 in 2022, which is obviously a longer streak than anyone else has had. He says he doesn't care. I think he does care. I think everyone would care. Maybe Brazil. What do you think about? Surely Brazil, that's something, that's a place he really gets buoyed by the crowd.
He tends to drive well at Brazil, but I don't actually think Merc really favours that circuit. Over the years, it has been a Red Bull circuit, and you know, apart from last year where they had the extra spicy engine, which was just a brand new engine going in, and they could crank it up because it only had 4 more races to do, which obviously they normally have to do a lot more than that. But no, I think this is their best opportunity. They haven't got the straight line speed, which is going to be the issue with Brazil and Abu Dhabi. And then Mexico, they've just got too much drag.
So I think this is probably a good opportunity just to let the people who are joining us freshly on Twitter, who might not have heard earlier, that this is a concurrent YouTube live stream and a Twitter space. So if you think we're ignoring your raised hands and requests to speak on Twitter, that's because we are. We're actually probably not looking at the Twitter screen very much because we have a whole bunch of people asking questions and making comments in the chat in the YouTube live stream. So if you'd like to join that, if you'd like to see our pretty faces and my pretty graphics I made earlier today, go to my profile on Twitter and click on the link that's the latest tweet I've done, and you can join us there and join everyone else. And thanks to everyone who is in the chat. It's nice to see such a fast moving chat with everyone's little not emojis, what do you call them, avatars. I'm so old. Because normally when I'm doing my live streams for sim racing, it's me and a handful of other people who care about sim racing, whereas Formula One in general is a bit more of a broad spectrum of people who are interested. So anyway, thanks to all the people who are on Twitter as well. So Arno Tina, I'm going to answer a question even though this person hasn't super chatted because I've noticed Arno. Arno says, have you guys seen Scarb's tweet about the new rules for 2023 having the detail of what brake systems should be made of? Do we think it could be one of Red Bull's tricks for superior ride quality? Why would the brake system affect the ride quality? Any ideas? It's bad that we've got no tech people on. It's just me and Alex who are very much not techie.
No, well, the whole part of it, the whole reason the name of the group is about the driving side of things. I'm not quite certain why that would help with ride. I mean, maybe it helps to balance when under heavy load for braking. Might help somebody like Danny Ricciardo if he manages to get another seat for next year, which I really hope he does. I'd
be confused if the brakes in any way affected the ride, apart from like the feel comfort of the brake. Yeah, like how comfortable you feel with the braking and like the profile of the braking. That's something that this is a bit off on a tangent, and we will get back to our list of topics in a moment. But you probably noticed this. In fact, I'm pretty sure you did. Lando Norris's pedal cam view that we've seen a few times. I think we've seen a Ricciardo one as well, but definitely Norris's. The travel in the brake pedal is huge. Way, way more than I've ever seen in any race car, let alone a single-seater. And I saw a few people in the sim racing world comment on this and say, why are we all making our brake pedals super stiff? We've all been told that race cars have stiff pedals. Look at Lando Norris's, it's super squishy. I don't know whether this is perspective and the fact that you're so close to it. Maybe it's a fisheye lens, it looks like it's moving further than it is, but it's definitely travelling a long way, isn't it? Which certainly, for me, would be weird anyway.
It looks like a G29 pedal.
And for those,
it was very jarring, and I remember. For those who don't know what a G29 is, G29 is a very entry-level sim setup of pedals where there's no real spring,
no resistance,
and it just goes backwards and forwards. But I mean, when I first saw that pedal cam box, obviously I have very limited car driving experience, but I literally texted you straight away and went, that's a lot of travel in that brake pedal.
Well, I bet your road car doesn't move that far. For people watching on the live stream, I'm going to show you, like, I'm going to move my hand. It's literally kind of like this much travel. Several centimeters, when I'd expect, a couple of centimeters to be the maximum. Certainly any time I've driven a single seater, whether it's like, a corporate single seater or a junior level real racing single seater, like a kind of Formula 4 level car, they're much stiffer than that. And all I can think is maybe at the bottom of the travel, it gets really stiff. But I might be completely wrong. Anyway,
it might be part of the reason that Danny Rick doesn't like it.
And that's why
maybe in the Red Bull, it was really, really stiff. And now he's got floppy pedals and doesn't like it. But we've also seen this on some of the car's paddles as well. On the gear shift paddles, we're used to, on our sims, mechanical gear shifts. And when I drove the...
Like a very short click.
When I drove the F3000 at Palmer's, again, that was a very definite short click. But we saw on Ocon's steering wheel that the paddles were a bit floppy. And we've actually found out that the reason Lewis Hamilton puts one hand over the steering wheel when he's starting the car is so he doesn't accidentally flip the paddle in the other way when he's violently shifting up the gears at the start, which blew my mind, because why would it do that? But
so Lars Astronomy in the chat says the article that Arno was referencing quotes, all cars must be equipped with only one brake system. which makes you wonder what tricks were used during 2022. So they've kind of, looks like they're trying to clamp down on something that teams may have been doing, but I can't really comment on what that might have been. We need Scarbs, really. We need someone who actually knows what they're talking about. But there we go. There may have been...
like the old McLaren second brake pedal.
Yeah, exactly. From what year?
90s.
98? 99?
It was during, been 98, 99, because it was when Hakkinen was winning, wasn't it?
So Arno, he's gone further. He says it could mean they've got one brake pedal for slow corners and a different one for fast corners. I mean, and he says giving different kinds of braking response. I still don't see how that would affect ride quality. I still don't see how, because ride quality refers to how bouncy the car is, how well it goes over curbs, how well it absorbs bumps, and how well it copes with surface changes and imperfections without snapping or having a moment of understeer or oversteer. So I still don't think it relates to ride, but certainly you could have a weird braking system that just was set up differently for slow corners and fast corners, so you weren't having to do constant diff changes and bias changes. Anyway, I'll tell you what, we should probably...
Eric Davis on Twitter says he thought there might have been an energy harvesting advantage.
Okay.
So maybe difference in the braking to harvest energy different. Again, that's not ride, but that could also be it. You know, light pressure or high pressure for max harvesting or minimum harvesting for maximum pace.
We've descended into a
Tech
techie
territory, which neither of us are qualified.
We're just two completely unqualified people talking rubbish about tech that we don't understand and might not even exist. So this is getting much more like one of our phone calls in the car now. Let's get back to our topic. So we were talking about whether or not Hamilton can continue his wins streak, and that leads us on to the next topic, which is, will Verstappen break the wins record for the most wins in a season, which currently stands at 13, if I'm not mistaken, jointly held by... I don't have any notes, I'm just riffing now, but I think I know this. Jointly held by Vettel and Schumacher, Michael Schumacher. So he's got 12. There are 4 races to go, so he can match them this weekend. He can equal the wins. That's something that's interesting. Over all Hamilton's dominant seasons, he's had 2014 to 2020. He didn't match that wins record. I guess that's because there are times where his teammate was actually good enough to take wins.
That's the whole thing, is when Lewis was out there winning races, he had a teammate that did push him along. You know, Schumacher, Vettel, Max have had, want for a better word, subservient teammates. But I think Max can win easily at least 2 more races this season, so I think he'll take the record. You know, whatever my actual opinion of Max Verstappen is, and regardless of the legalities of the Red Bull this season, he has driven phenomenally this year.
Look, you put Max Verstappen, or a driver of Max Verstappen's caliber, with a teammate who is, let's be honest, nowhere near his pace. Like, most or some of the time, but in outright pace terms, really nowhere near. In the most dominant newie car ever made, he's going to take the wins record in a long season as well. You know, in like the longest seasons ever, he's going to take the wins record. So I think that's
and where the only competitor car has done nothing but trip itself up.
Yes,
all season long.
Yeah, I mean that Ferrari. When you look at how many poles Leclerc's had, Max shouldn't have taken the wins record this year. But the Ferrari just isn't a very good race car by comparison.
My favourite stat is Max Verstappen has won more races when Leclerc has been on pole than Leclerc has won when he's been on pole.
Yeah, I mean, that's painful. That's painful for Leclerc. Sam Williams asks, will this be a podcast? No, it won't. This won't be a podcast, but it will be a bit of a dodgy Twitter space and a, hopefully, now the tech issues are largely gone, a half-decent YouTube live stream. The start of this, I can't believe how badly the start of this stream went, considering it was going to be perfect. But if you look back at any of my iRacing streams, it's basically exactly the same. So that's how it always goes. The best,
considering we got 100 people in the Twitter space, we've got 86 people in here. I never expected this kind of number, so I expected us to be able to make mistakes and then not get.
Yeah, exactly. What happened to like the 5 people that watch me drive an IndyCar and iRacing, so I can get it all wrong and it doesn't matter. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And again, if you're on Twitter and you want to ask a question, come join us in the YouTube live stream and get your chat questions in. So we've said Verstappen is going to take that wins record. So that's basically it, isn't it? Unless something crazy happens, especially considering He's not going to have any reliability issues because they've changed all the engine components enough times now. He's got loads of fresh stuff. Even if it does break, he can just start 15th and win anyway on most tracks.
Yep.
So that is a foregone conclusion. So,
yeah, I mean, funnily enough, talking about the reliability, considering neither Red Bull finished the first race of the season, they crashed. They also went out in Australia, and a couple of various issues in the first sort of 5 races, and they've had nothing go wrong ever since on either car.
And you know what? That's a really good point. Imagine how
phenomenal.
many wins they'd have had if they hadn't had that early. What was it? Was it a fuel pump issue on both cars at Bahrain? They'd have had.
Was he leading Bahrain?
It was so long ago.
I think the safety car got him the lead in Bahrain, didn't it? And his car failed from the lead, didn't it?
Definitely Melbourne. He was going to win, wasn't he? I actually wasn't watching Melbourne. That's one of the only races I didn't see at all. I think I was working or away or something like that. But yeah, anyway, dominant Red Bull and dominant Max. So we kind of, in terms of our list of questions, these were the main things we wanted to get through. And so the nice thing is now, with so many people in the chat, this kind of can turn into a little bit of a question and answer from the chat. There's only one more thing I wanted to talk about, and that was what you think about Pierre Gasly. So I know this isn't new news, but this is something we've not spoken about. Pierre Gasly to Alpine next year. I've got my own thoughts. What do you think about that move?
I'm only disappointed because I wanted Danny Rick to get it.
Oh, really?
I'm a big Danny Rick fan. Danny, I met him when I was with you at Race of Champions in 2015, and he was nothing but an absolute gentleman. I love his attitude, and I really, really wanted him to go back to Alpine to kind of prove that, he's just had a bad time at McLaren because of the way the McLaren works, the whole McLaren machine works. I like Pierre Gasly. I don't feel very strongly about Pierre, but there is lots of conversation about Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon's history, and that it's not that great. They were best met. It's a bit of a Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton story where they were besties and then they weren't. They seem to be lovey-dovey on the socials, as you'd want them to be if you were Alpine. But so I feel a bit meh about it. But where else could Gasly have gone? I don't think staying within the Red Bull program was going to do him any good, and it was really the only move. And we got a French team with 2 French drivers. It's a bit like when we had McLaren with 2 British drivers. So
before I give you my thoughts, I just want to point out in the chat, Rasmus, Brazuca, Joshy Stewart and Stephen have all absolutely trashed us and explained that Red Bull weren't going to win those races anyway, and that Leclerc was winning. Leclerc dominated Melbourne and was leading both Bahrain and Australia, and Charles killed it in Melbourne. So there we go. It shows
memory has never been our strong point.
Our knowledge of recent F1. That was this year. I could tell you what happened like in 1999 at the German Grand Prix.
This is why you do well in the quiz.
Yes, which I've never had an opportunity to do. So there we go. Hopefully I'll get in on the Missed Apex quiz at some point. Sometime I'll be invited on. Okay, so my thoughts on Gasly. I'm a big fan of Gasly. So when Hamilton retires, I mean, I don't think Gasly is the best driver after Hamilton, but he's certainly a driver that I like watching. I like things he says. I think he's quite cool. I'd like to be his friend.
You just fancy him because he's very pretty.
He's pretty as well. He's probably got one of the best bodies of the Formula One drivers, and he's got a cool French...
George Russell will have something to say about
He's got a much better physique than George. George Russell's obviously very fit, but tall and skinny. If you're looking for like an underwear model, it's Pierre Gasly, not George Russell. Anyway, putting aside the stuff with him and Ocon, because I think they're probably grown up enough to put stuff behind them now and whatever.
Have you ever met a racing driver?
I've met some racing drivers, yeah. Anyway, I think it's good for Gasly. I was desperate for him to get that drive. I didn't want Ricciardo to get it. I was really hoping Ricciardo wouldn't get it, because I think Gasly needed to break out of that Red Bull sphere, and Ricciardo had the opportunity to do that. Ricciardo got out of that, and he had a chance to plough his own furrow and try different teams, loads of different teams, and what's happened with Ricciardo's happened. But Gasly, I don't think has had a fair shake at it yet. He had that half a season against Verstappen where it all went terribly. But then he had his kind of redemption arc where he won at Monza, and before that even he got podium at Brazil in the year he was kicked out.
He did win at Monza.
Wait,
but...
Alex, sorry, I've got to press the button. People on Twitter can't hear this, but again, it's Millie Bobby Brown screaming, "Oh my god!" Because I promised we'd interrupt for the super chats, and Vims25 has asked via super chat, fast unreliable versus slow reliable, final debate. So we have to interrupt ourselves and settle that debate. Would you rather have
is that Daniel Ricciardo versus Gasly? As in Daniel is fast and unreliable and Gasly is slow and reliable?
No, I think this is just a general question about would you rather have a fast and unreliable car or a slow and reliable car? You go first. I've got a good answer anyway.
It goes back to the adage of to finish first you have to finish. But it's easier to make a fast car that's unreliable reliable than it is to make a slow car that's reliable fast. It's a bit like the same with drivers. I think Johnny Herbert said this years ago about Roman Grosjean.
Esteban Grosjean.
Roman Grosjean, where he said that you will always take the fast driver who's a bit crashy over the slow driver who stays on the track the whole time, because you haven't got to build speed, you just got to build reliability. So I take fast and unreliable with a good team who can make it reliable.
Yeah,
might be a bit of a cop out, but
okay. So no, I think you're on the right track there. So I'm taking this question as more of a you don't get to change the car. Like you've just got a fast and unreliable one, and you're stuck with it, or a slow and reliable one, and you're stuck with it. I will also take the fast and unreliable one, because if it's slow and reliable, yeah, great, you finished all the races at the back, who cares? You'd much rather win the odd race because you've got a fast, you might not win the championship, but you're not winning the championship in the slow, reliable car either. So you'd rather take the glory of a couple of race wins in your fast, unreliable car.
You get a Kimi Räikkönen in 2005, don't you? Where that McLaren was an absolute unbelievable monster of a car, and Kimi Räikkönen looked absolutely incredible that season, but he hardly finished the race because he kept breaking down. And we all just remember that season of should have been Kimi's year.
Yeah.
Kimi was amazing, but the car let him down.
Yeah,
so it's good for your legacy.
Fully agree. Connor Edwards asks, what happened in the 1999 German Grand Prix? So I've set myself up for that one, haven't I? Now I've actually got to remember. I think Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the Jordan was on course to win and stay in the championship fight, which was, it was Jordan's best ever year over a championship with Frentzen. Damon Hill was fading to nothing in his final season, and Frentzen was taking the mantle and fighting for the championship in a yellow Jordan. And something bad happened, I think just unreliability, and I'm pretty sure Stewart won. I think Johnny Herbert won for Stewart. No? Okay.
Mika Hakkinen won.
Oh, okay.
Frentzen was second in the Jordan.
Are you sure you're not
thinking?
thinking? Oh, maybe I'm getting this completely wrong then.
This is completely off memory. Has nothing.
This isn't. You're not looking at qualifying, are you? This is definitely the race result.
I am looking at qualifying.
Oh, right. Okay.
Eddie Irvine won.
Eddie Irvine won. Did he?
Eddie Irvine won, followed by Mika Salo, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, Ralf Schumacher, David Coulthard, Olivia Panis.
So I was completely wrong.
John Lacey, Mark Genet.
So the Stewarts were nowhere. This is definitely 1999 British Grand Prix you're reading here.
German Grand Prix.
Sorry, German. Yeah. Well, okay. So I've been corrected. I can't tell you what happens in the 1999 German Grand Prix. I've just made up a race. I've made up a race in my mind. My one was exciting anyway. So there we go. Irvine won from Salo, not Sato. Connor. Right, there we go.
Damon Hill was in the Jordan. He retired. Where was the other?
I've had an absolute nightmare.
Do people know how much of a Jordan fan you used to be?
I can tell people now.
You used to be a Jordan super fan.
So since this is a super informal live stream, and I was so much of a Jordan super fan that my bedroom was painted yellow. I basically just wore Jordan clothes. If I had the slide here ready, if I knew we were going to talk about this, I'd have had an image ready of me drunk, dressed in a Jordan race suit. There's a piece of a Jordan on Alex's wall that I used to have that I gave to him because I had too many of them, too much Jordan rubbish lying about. I had to palm it off to people like Alex. So yeah,
it was a
there we go.
birthday present.
That was a big. I mean, it's a piece of a Formula One car.
I love it.
It's a barge board.
It's a great talking point when everyone goes, "What the hell's that yellow thing on your wall?"
Is that 2003 Timo Glock or something, or Giorgio Pantano? Can't remember. Anyway,
it was from whatever was the worst Jordan.
Yeah, it was when it was a Ford engine or I think it was Ford or Cosworth. I think it was like 2003.
It's a barge board.
Anyway, there we go.
We've gone on a massive tangent.
We have, but that's the point of this. That's the point of this.
Yeah,
We've still got 15 minutes or 20 minutes to fill with more tangents. Okay, more COTA talking points then. Are Ferrari actually fast enough anymore to win the race? Or is this literally just going to be a Red Bull, a Verstappen walkover?
It very much looks like Ferrari have turned off the tap. And I wouldn't be surprised if they are focusing on next year, because I think since Leclerc binned it at France, they haven't really looked like much of a threat ever since.
Yeah, they've absolutely faded to nothing. Alex, you're very low in the picture.
Ferrari.
I don't know. You probably just moved your camera, but
it's because I moved my camera to show you my Jordan.
I mean, we're all about the high quality broadcast on this stream. So I agree with you.
You never move the camera. First rule of YouTubing: never move the camera.
I fully agree with you. When you look at like a points graph of Verstappen versus Leclerc, obviously it's only really been Leclerc who's been challenging. I know Sainz has had his moments, but over a season, there's no question really Leclerc is the man at Ferrari. It obviously looks brilliant for 3 or 4 races for Leclerc, and he's got a much steeper points graph line. But the moment Verstappen crosses over and overtakes in the standings, it's going one way, and the Ferrari line just doesn't rise very steeply, and they just the car's just not good enough, is it? It actually doesn't matter. All the things they've messed up, I don't think it matters. They would have been closer. Leclerc would have been closer. There's times like Silverstone where he should have been the one that they favoured, and he should have won instead of Sainz. But even so, you'd still be looking at Verstappen having a massive, unassailable points lead by this time in the season, because he's just too quick.
I think it would have been a little bit like the 18-19 season, where Ferrari again started strong, pushed Lewis for a lot of the season, and then the second half of the season, Lewis just took off, which is, to be fair, is exactly what's happened here, where Ferrari have just faded. But I think the problem has also been Ferrari have made too many mistakes. It's not even the car. It's just they've made too many fundamental errors, simple strategy errors, driver errors. They were organising a pit stop for Carlos Sainz at France while he's trying to overtake Sergio Perez. It's like, what are you doing?
So, apologies, Alex. We have to interrupt us again because we've had another super chat. Hang on. Sorry, Twitter people. You can't hear this really cool thing. Promise it's cool. Everyone's going to be very tired of it now. It actually wasn't a question. It was Paul Handley, who happens to be my little brother, and he hasn't asked a question. He just wanted to say, my room was McLaren colours. And I remember, and I haven't remembered this for years, but he's right. Obviously, it was his room. He had the McLaren 98-99 kind of West livery colour scheme with the dark greys and the kind of fluorescent orangey accents. That was cool. Very cool. So me and Paul both had our own cool Formula One themed bedrooms. And we got people commenting on the Jordan liveries as well. For those of you who aren't old enough or been following Formula One for long enough to know this, Jordan was like a kind of cool party team, and they were the low budget. They're what became Force India. Well, it was Midland. What else did it become? Spiker, Midland, Force India, Racing Point, and Aston Martin. Might have missed one out in there, but they used to be really cool, and they had a snake livery, so a bright yellow car with like the nose cone looked like a snake, and because it was quite a pointy nose, it really lent itself. And it had Benson and Hedges cigarette sponsorship, but when they couldn't have the cigarette sponsorship, they wrote Bitten and Hisses on the side, which was quite cool. And in the following 2 years, it had a Hornet on the nose. 1 year, the car was supposed to look like a Hornet, and then the following year, it was kind of like a picture of a Hornet, and then they had Buzzin and Hornets instead, which was also cool. Yeah, all those ways they used to try and get around cigarette sponsorship by writing stuff which we still knew what it meant, but technically they were allowed.
Well, a bit like when Ferrari still had Marlboro on the side of their cars for the last 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. Just without actually writing it.
But everybody knows it's Marlboro.
Yeah, exactly. And actually for the last...
they went to Mission Winnow because Mission Winnow is vape. I mean, neither of us smoke, so we wouldn't know. But isn't Mission Winnow the vape thing?
I have no idea. But it's Philip Morris, isn't it? Anyway, look, we're advertising them right now for free to the 100 and whatever people are listening.
Philip Morris, I'll take a check, thank you.
So, do we have any more questions about the upcoming... Oh, hang on, got to press it again. Wow, that's a big super chat.
Thank you very much.
So, Raymond Ray in the super chat has given our biggest super chat of the night, and he asks, what do you think is going to happen or should happen to Red Bull for overspending? So that's a slightly different question to the one we had earlier.
I'm going to sit back,
Debbie Hood.
I'm going to put it on mute, and I'm going to let you go first on this one.
Okay, so I've commented on this a couple of times in different Twitter spaces and maybe on podcasts. The answer really depends on what the crime was for me. Some people have said that if they went £1 over the budget, over the cost cap, you should have the book thrown at them. And I don't quite subscribe to that line of thinking. I understand the point. You know, a technical infringement doesn't matter whether you're 0.1 millimeters over or you're not, or you're over by a meter. You're going to get a penalty. However, I think with this, there should be some proportionality to it. So I think from what we've heard from other team principals, and maybe they're blowing things up for their own benefit, it would make sense. I think an overspend that's in the millions, whether it's 1 million upwards, say, is a significant, even though it's called minor still, it's a significant enough breach that everyone else managed to avoid it and everyone else was careful enough to make sure they avoided it, and it would definitely have a positive impact on your development. And not just for that year's car, but for the following year's car, because if you're far enough ahead with the previous year, then you can move on to next year's development early. And basically, that small leg up you get at the beginning, that small advantage that you've illegally gained by spending too much, is effectively going to slightly snowball going forward. And yeah, I think basically the bigger the overspend, the bigger the penalty. And I know everyone's saying they shouldn't have championships taken away. I don't totally subscribe to that. I think if it was a big enough breach, if you don't take away previous championships, then there's really no incentive for people to not just throw caution to the wind, overspend 1 year, win a championship, and then, not care about the next couple of years. Yeah, we get a massively limited development after that, but I'm going to sell the team anyway, or we don't care about 2 years' time, or whatever. So I think if it's a really big breach, 5 million and up, I really think you should be looking at removing championships. Below 5 million, and these are just figures I'm pulling out of thin air, I think you need a significant development restriction going forward. And if we're talking below 1 million, it needs to be a big telling off and a reasonably significant development restriction. What do you think? Am I being too fair? Not fair enough?
Before I give my answer, I got disconnected from Twitter, so you need to react.
Oh, right.
Chat, so
okay, that's all right. Twitter people can't hear you, but I'm adding you as a speaker now. There you go. You should be back on, Alex. Sorry, Twitter people. Don't worry. Alex wasn't talking anyway for ages. I was just on a big old rant.
I see money in motorsport, especially in a sport where you can develop the car as a competitive sporting advantage, and therefore
financial doping.
Yeah, exactly that. Therefore, I do feel that you breach, you get punished to a sporting punishment, because, a wing that's out, maybe too big or not compliant, there's no question, there's no argument, you're disqualified. You come in with too little fuel at the end of the race, you're disqualified. You spend too much money, you're disqualified. You're too light, you're disqualified. So, and the thing with the financials, as you spoke about, it has a lasting advantage. So then you talk about when people go off and you gain an advantage by going off the circuit. There is so many things that you can account for the overspend on a sporting basis, which for me screams of they have to lose a championship. Ross Brawn said it in whenever it was when they were bringing in the financial rules. He said, if you're in breach, you're going to lose your championship. And they have to stick to it. But also, what you get, if Red Bull are not punished, and let's say it's 2 million. Let's say what we've heard from the Zach Brown letter is correct, and let's say it's 2 million. 2 million can buy you a lot. 2 million is also a lot for the people that Red Bull made redundant to then, because of the cost cap, to then still go over the cost cap is disrespectful to a lot of those people. That can buy lots of components. It can buy lots of employees, high-level employees with lots of clout that can come into the business. And I just think it needs to make an example of them as well, because I think Toto came out and said, well, if I can breach it by 2 million quid and only get a fine, well, I'm going to breach it by 2 million quid and only get a fine next year. And then what's the point of the cost cap?
So I've got a couple of things on what you've just said there. First of all, just on the Ross Brawn point, just to be completely fair and to make sure we're not being overly biased in one direction, Ross Brawn was specifically talking about if a team fraudulently breached the cost cap. So if they...
What classes as fraudulent?
Yes, so I take your point. I think essentially if you are deliberately hiding crimes knowing that they're wrong. So you're trying to not just find a loophole, but you're trying to actually hide things from the governing body.
Like claiming it's catering or paying Adrian Newey's own business to pay his salary.
So I think the catering thing was just a joke someone made up. Yeah, I don't think that was
spiraled well out of control.
It was very funny. It was very, very funny.
Wings are wings.
Yeah, exactly. That was all. I saw a great picture of a Red Bull nose cone and a front wing assembly with some drinks on it, and they said it was a new.
I sent you that.
Is it you? Okay, it was like a new drinks holder or something. Anyway, yeah. So that's the first thing. Second, I've seen some messages in the chat saying that it can't be a financial penalty because that's not enough. And I actually think if it's a big enough overspend, it needs to be a financial penalty and a development penalty. I think the problem with it...
Financial penalty is pointless, though.
Well,
they've got the money,
but
they won't feel it.
So I think it needs to be in addition to something which they feel more. The problem with it being a championship deduction or a points deduction, if it's Constructors' Championship, I just don't think they care. And I don't think... I don't think the governing body remotely have the stomach to remove a driver's championship. I think... Although I think it would be fair to do so in the right circumstances, I just don't think they'll do it. I just don't think it's in their mind. They didn't even want to correct a mistake at the time. They didn't even want to admit that there was a mistake made last year when it was clear for everyone to see. So I think the fact that a financial regulation that's a new regulation, that's not something that's been around for years, has been broken and it's only a minor, you've got the wording that it's a minor breach. I just don't think Drivers' Championship is going to be on their menu of things, even though technically it is one of the things. So
I think you've hit the nail on the head with they don't have the stomach to do it.
And I think they would have the stomach to remove a Constructors' Championship, but because we saw that with McLaren all those years ago, but I just don't think Red Bull care enough. That's why I think it has to be the only thing which will hurt them that the FIA are willing to do will be a development restriction, and it needs to be severe if the overspend was severe, basically.
If it was Aston Martin or Alfa Romeo or Haas that had been the only team to breach by that kind of money, they'd have already had the book thrown at them. I think because it's Red Bull, because we are talking about championships, we are talking about a big political game because they have two teams. I think it's such a difficult decision to make. And you also know that Spendy Spice and the rest of his team will not take this lying down. And the reason it's taking so long...
Spendy Spice is brilliant, by the way.
Is the negotiation. And the negotiation that is ongoing. And it's still difficult we can speculate as much as we want. But until we get the official figures out, we think it's 2 million because of something Zach Brown said. How does Zach Brown know? Should Zach Brown know? When the whole thing came out initially, when Toto and Binotto weren't talking about Red Bull, but they were talking about teams breaching the regulations. How did they know? So it all screams of inside jobs and lots of people saying things they shouldn't be saying.
So there are ways that Toto and Zach could have information which doesn't say that they have personally done anything wrong. You know, they can be leaks that are nothing to do with them kind of going and finding a leak. So Toto and Zach could have legitimate information of the exact amount Red Bull have overspent, and that could entirely just be an issue with someone from the FIA being a bit too loose-lipped, and you know that's not Zach and Toto being, you know, doing anything dodgy. So just to point that out, Arno's asked in the chat, have we covered the Merc upgrades? We have kind of. in as much as we know. So we know there are upgrades, and we know it's almost certainly weight reduction by up to 5 kilos and an attempt to widen the setup window of the car and make it work in more situations.
Because that's been their biggest problem this year, is 1 minute they can have the car set up perfectly, and then the car's a mess. And that's been their biggest issue, is getting the car and the tyres, most importantly, in the window that it actually wants to operate in. And it can literally be they start near the front if they get them in the right window for qualifying, or they don't get out of Q1. That's kind of how bad it's been for Mercedes. I think they've got better with it as the year's gone on. Because what was it? Was it Saudi where Lewis went out in Q1?
The beginning of the year was a disaster, for sure.
Yeah, and they're getting on top of it, but I don't believe we're going to see a massive change. I don't think we're going to see either George or Lewis win a race this season. All as a Hamilton fan, as a Merc fan, all I can hope, and a competition fan, all I can hope is we have a almighty 21-esque Lewis, Mercedes, Red Bull, Max, George fight next year, because that would be mega. But I think if it's the three of them into battle, Max will still win it.
So,
because
enough about those losers that you've just been talking about. We've got some breaking news I noticed in the chat. Nicholas Latifi is rumoured to be joining IndyCar with Ganassi next year. I think that's
fantastic.
Connor Edwards again with the gossip there. So they got Ericsson a while ago, and he went on to win the Indy 500. Really good point. Could Nicholas Latifi be the next IndyCar star? There's a question.
Didn't know where the chicane was in Suzuka.
It was misty. It was misty and wet.
I don't care.
It's like
one of the most iconic circuits on the entire track. That corner in itself is iconic because of Prost and Senna on multiple years. I mean, it's so inexcusable of a top-level professional racing driver.
So,
absolutely ridiculous.
At the time, I was willing to give Nicholas Latifi the benefit of the doubt because
to blame the car.
It was so stupid that you just turn before the chicane and go down a road that didn't exist. When he said over the radio, I don't know what happened there with the car, he said something. He basically tried to blame some kind of car issue that distracted him or made him pull over. And I did think for a split second, but for a while actually, I thought maybe he could have felt something weird with the car and he just wanted to pull off at the earliest opportunity. There's loads of goat emojis being posted in the YouTube live stream chat just for people on Twitter. Goat Tifi is a thing. So I thought maybe it was a legitimate problem. But it does turn out, I think he's admitted, he just wasn't paying attention or was distracted by a switch change or something. And just, it looks quite similar to the corner. It's just like 20 metres earlier.
The only one that was worse than that was when Pastor Maldonado crashed in a practice session because he was fiddling with switches on his car and kept on turning right when the track went left.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. We also did, to be fair, Kimi Räikkönen did a similar thing to Latifi. It wasn't quite the same. He was trying to find a way. He went off at Brazil at the penultimate corner. He was trying to find his way back onto the track. If you haven't seen this, go look it up on YouTube. Just search Räikkönen Brazil gets lost or something like that. And he goes off up an escape route that he thinks will join him back onto the track and finds out after like 20 seconds of driving that there's a shut gate or there's no way through. And he has to stop, turn around, drive the wrong way back to the track, and then he just goes, screw this, and just turns right across the grass and just bumps across the grass all the way back to the track. It's absolutely hilarious if you haven't already seen it.
It's so standard Kimi Räikkönen as well.
People love Kimi Räikkönen. I was never a massive Kimi fan, but that particular moment did make me laugh. So there we go. So
I was a fan of Kimi Räikkönen when he was fast, brutal, absolute talent Kimi Räikkönen. I wasn't a fan of the dickhead comments over the radio where everybody lauded him as hilarious and genius for those sorts of things, when it was just him mostly being petulant.
Some people may never have, people that are relatively new F1 fans might have never seen the period where Kimi was the best. He was the fastest, young, up and coming. He was like the next massive thing. And it would be crazy to think that he'd only win one championship and that he'd kind of luck into that particular one. But does that speak to the fact that the field wasn't as strong back then? It was like kind of older drivers, maybe, I don't know, the talent. People are going to crucify us in the chat for suggesting this, but maybe when Kimi joined, the field just wasn't quite as professional and high level as it is now, for the most part. Let GOAT Tiffy aside, and now and then like later on, was it just that Kimi got slower because he got older and didn't care as much, or was it just that everyone else was just that bit better? We'll never know.
I will address the Kimi thing. I think when Kimi came in, he was raw, he was hungry.
We have to go in a minute, by the way. We've gone over. We're up to our hours.
Literally said, we were saying earlier, 45 minutes, hour, absolute tops.
1 hour is obviously how long it takes me to drink a gin and tonic, because I'm nearly finished now.
we'll take the technical time, the technical issues to take 10 minutes more for it. But Kimi was raw. He was hungry. He was elevated into a McLaren that had race-winning potential straight away. And then he kind of was never in a winning car until he turned up at Ferrari. As for strength of grid, now I probably will get crucified for this because I've been crucified for it before, but I still genuinely believe it. Athletes in the world of sport in general only get better. You have a bigger pool to pick from. You have people like Max Verstappen, who has been in a go-kart since he was 4 years old. When he's not in a go-kart, he's been in a simulator and literally been trained to do it. Damon Hill didn't get in a Formula 1 car until he was 35 years old, never did karting, and had a rubbish bike career, and then became a Formula 1 world champion. I genuinely believe we have the best grid, bar two people, Goat Tiffy and Lance Stroll. We have one of the best grids we've ever had before on pure raw ability and talent. They make mistakes, but some of the best people make mistakes all the time. And I think when Schumacher came into the sport, I think he was an absolute revelation.
That's the one.
I think he changed the sport from a fitness point of view. He was the fittest by absolute miles. He used to take his own gym with him. He used to train in the humidity and temperature, which nobody else was doing. They were all out getting drunk and eating pizza over a course of a race weekend, while Schumacher is being absolutely militant. And that's what gave him, the whole big thing with Schumacher was running qualifying laps for however many laps a race was. They can all do that now because they are all fit enough. They are all absolute athletes. Jenson Button used to do triathlons for fun.
So
I can't think of anything worse.
My only point on this, and this isn't an original point, I think I've probably stolen this from Spanners from Missed Apex, but it would be weird if F1 was the only sport, or motorsport was the only sport where, as preparation has improved, simulations improved, nutrition has improved, techniques have improved. It would be weird if Formula 1 was the only sport where the athletes didn't also just get better. Look at all the records. Every Olympics, every World Championships, as the years go on, records are broken, athletes get faster, athletes get better at the thing they're doing because of all those reasons. And Formula 1 is even more so because you've got things like, although there's less real-life testing than there used to be, they're all the way through the junior careers. Drivers have so much opportunity to practice. They do so many laps and all the sim driving and obviously, better fitness training. It's just a more professional sport. The drivers, they start younger and I think they're fitter and better trained. So it would be weird to think that they're not faster than they were 10 years previous or 20 years previous when it was less professional and taken less seriously and we had worse technology.
The only difference they have now is the new drivers coming into F1 don't get to test the car. You know, Lewis Hamilton did miles and miles and miles of practice for McLaren in testing for McLaren before jumping into the seat in 2007. So he was fully prepared. You know, for a lot of the new guys coming into Formula One, they get maybe one test session in the off season when they do the post Abu Dhabi test. They might get a filming day or a straight line test, but they don't really get to do any proper mileage until the first race of the season, because we all know how much of a mess testing can be. So,
however,
I think
they get more races than they ever used to. So they get to do a lot of races, and their junior careers, they're probably doing a lot more driving than their decades in the past counterparts would have done. Look at Lando Norris. Before he started, a couple of years before he was in Formula One, he was racing in 4 single-seater championships in the same year, probably plus karting, plus sim driving. I think he won all of those junior categories as well at the time.
he's so good.
But that you can't beat practice like that, guys. I think we should probably call it a day on the stream and on the Twitter space. We still have people in the Twitter space, so it didn't totally fail, so that's good. We've got people chatting on the live stream on YouTube. If you haven't said hi on the YouTube stream, or you want to see what we look like in real life, if you don't already know, you want to see my cool graphics that I've worked on, go and check out my YouTube channel and watch this back, or leave it a like. If you're in the YouTube channel now, like the stream, and
I haven't done that. I'm doing that.
You will have all subscribed anyway if you're in the chat, because I don't think it lets you chat unless you're subscribed. And just thanks to everyone for joining us. This was a bit of a pilot, bit of a test. I definitely aim to have the intro a little bit more slick next time. We had it all planned out. It was going to be brilliant, but whatever.
And your computer crashed.
It's character. Honestly, just to flesh it out exactly what happened, I was sat here taking a sip of gin and tonic, and everything went black. And it just had... my computer never crashes. It's like a supercomputer behind me. It's awesome. It just turned off. Everything turned off. Restarted. Luckily, some of the windows they popped up and they restored to what they were. But obviously, it started streaming again, and it streamed with the wrong screen up, so everyone could see me straight away. It was a nightmare. Anyway, thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for asking the questions. Thank you in particular to the super chatters, all of you guys. Thanks for asking us questions. Let's try and do this. Before every race, Alex. We'll try and make this like a Wednesday night thing. I quite like the 10 p.m. It's quite late. It's quite late at night unless you're in America. But it's quite nice. Choice,
'cause I play football on a Wednesday.
Yeah. Well. Okay. Fine. How did the football go? Let everyone know how the football went.
I scored 5 goals.
Alex, if you didn't know, Alex is an athlete. He's a top level for his age group. For over 40s. He's in the over 40s class, but
I watched the Goonies for the first time the other day, and yes, don't come at me, chat. I watched
don't know
the
what that
Goonies
is.
for the first time the other day, and I more represent Chunk and the Truffle Shuffle. Than I do an athlete.
That is definitely the oldest person reference we've had. I don't know what that means. I don't know what the Goonies is.
1986.
I was alive. I definitely wasn't watching telly.
Josh Brolin was in it.
Anyway,
was
guys,
Thanos.
We're well off topic. Thanks for watching, everyone.
We are.
And thanks to everyone in Europe who is up late at night. Have a great rest of the week. Enjoy the USA Grand Prix at COTA, and we'll see you next time on Full Chat. Alex came up with that name, by the way. Right, here's the intro screen.